The Imperium declared my world dead. They forgot I was still breathing. That is the sentence I repeat to myself in the darkness, in the ruins, in the ash-choked silence of a planet that no longer has a name in Imperial records. Valdrath, Secundus, that is what we called it, what I still call it. Though the designation has been struck from every star chart, every logistical manifest, every memory bank in the Administratum's endless archives. The world fell 3 months ago. The evacuation transports lifted away 2 months and 27 days ago. I have been alone ever since. Alone except for the thing that hunts me, the thing that moves through the ruins with footsteps that are not quite human, that whispers my name in voices I do not recognize, that watches me from the shadows with eyes that glow like embers in a dying fire. I am the last man on a dead world, and I am not alone. The world died slowly, then all at once. We had held the line for 14 months, my regiment, the Valdrath 19th, dug into trenches and bunkers across the planetary capital, fighting an enemy we could not see, could not predict, could not kill fast enough. The cultists came first, rising from the lower hives like a plague, spreading their corruption through whispers and promises and blades in the dark. Then the daemons came, tearing through reality in the industrial districts, turning factories into altars of screaming metal and flesh. The Lord Commander ordered a fighting retreat, pulling us back district by district, street by street, until we were confined to the evacuation zones, where the transports were supposed to come, where the Navy was supposed to extract us and burn the world from orbit. We believed them. We believed because there was nothing else to believe. I remember the sky that final day. It was the color of old bruises, choked with smoke from the burning hives, streaked with contrails from orbital bombardments that shook the ground beneath our boots. The ash fell like snow, metallic and cold, clinging to our uniforms and our skin and the barrels of our lasguns. The Voxnet was a chaos of screaming voices, officers shouting coordinates, troopers begging for extraction, Medicae calling for supplies that would never come. The evacuation ships roared overhead, massive bulk transports flanked by Navy gunships. Their engines so loud they drowned out the artillery, their exhaust trails cutting black lines across the dying sky. We ran toward them through the ruins of the hive's outer districts, past hab blocks that had collapsed into mountains of rubble, past burning vehicles and bodies piled so high they blocked the streets. I was a guardsman. I had been a farmer's son on a world I could barely remember, conscripted at 17, trained for 6 weeks, deployed to a war I did not understand. I had survived 14 months of that war. I had held the line when the cultists came, when the daemons came, when the sky split open and bled. I had watched my squadmates die Carrick with his throat torn out by a possessed PDF trooper, Silara burned alive by warp fire, Josen dragged screaming into the darkness by something with too many limbs, and I had kept firing, kept moving, kept believing that the Emperor would protect, that the Imperium would save us, that duty and faith would be enough. I had believed, because the alternative was madness. The artillery strike hit without warning. One moment I was running through a collapsed transit tunnel, my boots splashing through stagnant water, my breath ragged in my chest, following the rest of my platoon toward the extraction point. The next moment, the world exploded into noise and light and falling stone. The tunnel ceiling came down in a cascade of rockcrete and twisted rebar, and I felt the ground disappear beneath me, felt myself falling, tumbling, crushed beneath the weight of the collapsing structure. I do not remember hitting the ground. I remember only darkness and pain, and the distant roar of engines growing fainter, and the terrible certainty that I was going to die here, buried alive beneath a dead city on a dying world. I woke to silence. Not the silence of sleep, but the silence of abandonment, the silence of a world that has exhaled its last breath and will never inhale again. My head was ringing, my vision blurred with blood and dust. My left arm was pinned beneath a slab of rockcrete, my flak armor cracked across the chest, my lasgun lost somewhere in the rubble. I could taste copper and ash. I could smell burning promethium and something worse, something organic and rotting that clung to the back of my throat. I pulled myself free, inch by agonizing inch, dragging my body through the wreckage until I emerged into the open air, into the ash-choked twilight of a world the Imperium had abandoned. The evacuation zone was empty. The transports were gone. The sky above was no longer streaked with contrails, but silent and still, the color of old iron, the clouds hanging low and heavy like a shroud. I stood in the center of what had been a staging area, surrounded by abandoned supply crates and discarded equipment, and the bodies of those who had not made it to the ships in time. The VoxNet was silent. I activated my helmet Vox, cycling through every channel command, logistics, Medicae, emergency, and heard nothing but static, the empty hiss of dead air. I called out, my voice hoarse and cracking, but there was no answer. Only the wind, low and mournful, carrying ash and the smell of burning. I found a Vox set in a half-collapsed bunker, its power cell still flickering weakly. I plugged in my helmet and listened, and after a long moment I heard it, a distant, automated broadcast, looping endlessly, its tone flat and bureaucratic and utterly devoid of humanity. All Imperial assets evacuated. Planet Valdrath Secundus status, lost. Exterminatus, protocol pending. Coordinates sealed. Transmission ends. I stared at the Vox set, my hands shaking, my mind struggling to process what I had just heard. They were gone. My regiment, the evacuation fleet, the Lord Commander, the Commissar who had promised we would all stand together or fall together, they were gone. They had left me. They had declared the world lost, sealed the coordinates, condemned it to orbital bombardment and oblivion, and they had left me here to die. I sank to my knees in the ash, my lasgun forgotten beside me, and I wanted to scream, to rage, to demand an explanation, but I had no voice. I only knelt there in the ruins and waited for the transports to return, because I could not accept that they would not, because the alternative was unthinkable. But they did not return. Hours passed, the sky darkened, the ash continued to fall, and slowly, like ice forming in my chest, I understood. I was alone. The Imperium had abandoned me. The Emperor, if he watched at all, did not care. Valdrath Secundus was dead, and I was its last living witness, and I would die here in the silence, forgotten, unmourned, erased from the records as if I had never existed. That was when I heard it. A sound, distant and distorted, echoing through the empty streets of the ruined hive. It was not human. It was not the wind or the groan of settling metal or the crack of stressed rockcrete. It was a scream, high-pitched and warbling, rising and falling in pitch like laughter or sobbing or something in between. I froze, my hand moving instinctively toward my combat knife, my eyes scanning the ruins around me. The sound came again, closer now, and I saw movement, a shadow darting between two collapsed buildings, too fast to focus on, too large to be a scavenger animal. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself it was metal twisting in the heat, debris shifting, my mind playing tricks after the trauma of the collapse. I told myself because the alternative was worse. But deep down, I knew. I was not alone on this dead world. Something else had survived, and it had heard me. I spent the first night in the ruins of a Departamento Militarum depot, barricading myself inside a storage room filled with empty ammunition crates and rotting ration packs. The walls were thick rockcrete, the door reinforced steel, and I wedged a piece of rebar through the handle to keep it shut. I sat with my back against the wall, my combat knife in one hand, my helmet Vox crackling softly with static in the other, and I waited for dawn. But dawn did not come. The sky remained the same flat, bruised grey, the ash falling in slow spirals, the light dim and diffuse and unchanging. I realized, with a sinking certainty, that the planet's rotation had been disrupted, that the bombardments and the warp taint had broken something fundamental in the world's geophysics, and that there would be no more day or night, only this endless twilight, this half-death. I could not sleep. Every sound was a threat. The wind howling through broken windows, the groan of stressed metal, the patter of ash against the walls, and beneath it all, barely audible, the sound of breathing. Not my own. Something outside, circling the depot, its footsteps soft and deliberate, stopping when I held my breath, resuming when I exhaled. I pressed my ear to the door and listened, and I heard it, a low, wet rasping, like lungs struggling to draw air, and beneath that, a faint clicking, rhythmic and insectile, like claws tapping against stone. It stayed there for hours, pacing, waiting, and I stayed inside, my knife gripping so tightly my hand went numb, my mind screaming at me to run, to fight, to do something, but I did nothing. I only waited, and when the breathing finally faded into the distance, I did not feel relief. I felt watched. By the third day, I had begun to map the ruins. I moved cautiously, staying low, avoiding open streets, keeping to the shadows of collapsed buildings and transit tunnels. The hive was a graveyard. Bodies lay everywhere, civilians, guardsmen, PDF troopers, cultists frozen in the poses of their deaths, their flesh withered by ash and heat, their eyes empty sockets staring at nothing. I searched them for supplies, ration packs, water canteens, ammunition. Most had been looted already, their pockets turned inside out, their weapons stripped. But by what? By whom? The evacuation had been 3 days ago. There should have been no one left to loot the dead. And then I saw it. A corpse that had been moved. A guardsman, his uniform torn, his lasgun missing, lying face down in the center of a street. I had passed this street before, hours earlier, and the body had been face up, arms spread, positioned against a wall. Now it was moved, dragged. The ash around it disturbed, showing drag marks, long, shallow grooves, as if something with claws had pulled the body 30 meters from its original position. I stared at the drag marks, my breath coming faster, my mind racing. Something had moved this corpse. Something was here. Something was watching me. I found the footprints later that day. They were pressed into the ash near a collapsed chapel, 3-toed and deep, the stride uneven, as if the creature that made them was limping or dragging one leg. The prints led away from the chapel, winding through the ruins, doubling back on themselves, circling. I followed them for 20 meters before I realized what I was doing, before I understood that I was being led, that whatever made these prints wanted me to follow, wanted me to see. I stopped, my hand on my knife, my eyes scanning the ruins, and I saw it for the first time, a shape, hunched and elongated, standing on the roof of a hab block 50 meters away. It was too far to see clearly, but I saw the outline too tall, too thin, limbs bent at wrong angles, and I saw the eyes, 2 pale points of light, glowing faintly in the dim twilight. It did not move. It only watched. And then, when I took a step toward it, it turned and disappeared over the edge of the roof, moving with a speed that should not have been possible. I ran. I do not know why. Instinct, perhaps, or panic, or the primal need to flee from a predator that has marked you as prey. I ran through the ruins, my boots kicking up ash, my breath ragged, my vision tunneling. I did not look back. I did not stop until I reached a fortified bunker, its walls scarred by last fire, its door hanging open on broken hinges. I threw myself inside and slammed the door shut, wedging debris against it, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the rebar I used to brace the entrance. I collapsed against the wall, gasping, my heart hammering in my chest, and I tried to tell myself that I had imagined it, that the shape on the roof was a hallucination, a trick of the light, my mind breaking under the strain of isolation. But I knew better. I had seen it, and it had seen me. That night, I heard the scratching. It started quietly, a faint rasp against the bunker's outer wall, like claws dragging across metal. Then it grew louder, more insistent, moving along the wall, circling the bunker, probing for weaknesses. I sat in the center of the room, my knife in one hand, my helmet vox in the other, and I listened. The scratching stopped at the door. I heard breathing again, wet and labored, and beneath it, a sound that made my blood run cold, whispering, low and distorted, cycling through syllables I could not understand, rising and falling in pitch like a broken recording. And then, clear and unmistakable, I heard my name. Torius. My name. Spoken in a voice that was not human, that mimicked the intonation but not the warmth, that sounded like vocal cords that had been twisted and stretched and broken. I pressed my hand over my mouth to stifle the scream building in my throat, and I stared at the door, at the narrow gap beneath it, and I saw the shadow, thin and distorted, shifting in the faint light, as if something was crouched just outside, its face pressed to the gap, its eyes searching for me. It whispered my name again, over and over, a chant, a prayer, a threat, and then it stopped. The shadow withdrew, The footsteps faded into the distance, and I was left alone in the darkness, shaking, weeping, my mind fracturing beneath the weight of a single, undeniable truth. I was not the last man on Valdrath Secundus. I was the last prey, and the hunt had only just begun. I found the message on the 7th day. I had moved deeper into the hive, searching for supplies, for water, for anything that could keep me alive for one more day. The bunker had become unbearable, the walls closing in, the silence pressing down like a physical weight, and I could not stay there, could not sit and wait for the thing to return. I moved through the ruins like a ghost, keeping to the shadows, avoiding open spaces, my eyes scanning constantly for movement. The ash had grown thicker, piling in drifts against collapsed walls, filling the streets until they were nearly impassable. The air was cold and dry, tasting of metal and decay, and my throat burned with every breath. I entered a planetary defense force barracks, its walls pockmarked with las fire, its interior gutted by fire. The bodies here were burned beyond recognition, their uniforms melted into their flesh, their weapons fused to their hands. I searched the wreckage, my movements mechanical, my mind numb, and I found a cache of rations in a locker that had survived the flames. I ate them cold, barely tasting the nutrient paste, and I drank from a canteen of stale water that tasted of rust and chemicals. And then I saw it, scratched into the wall above the locker in crude, jagged letters: "Run." The word was carved deep into the rockcrete, the strokes uneven, as if made by claws. I stared at it, my hand frozen on the canteen, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. This was not graffiti. This was not random. This was deliberate. A message, a warning, or a taunt. I backed away from the wall, my breath coming faster, and I turned to leave, and I saw another message, carved into the opposite wall. "Hide." And another, above the doorway: "I see you." I ran. I stumbled through the barracks, through the ash-choked streets, through the ruins of the hive, my mind screaming at me to stop, to think, to breathe, but I could not. I could only run, because the alternative was standing still, and standing still meant being found. I ran until my legs gave out, until I collapsed against the side of a burned-out chimera, my lungs burning, my vision swimming with exhaustion. And as I lay there, gasping, I heard it again, the whisper. My name, spoken from somewhere behind me, close enough that I could feel the breath on the back of my neck. Torius. I spun around, my knife raised, but there was nothing. Only the ash and the ruins and the empty street stretching into the distance. I waited, my heart hammering, my eyes scanning every shadow, every corner, every gap in the rubble. And then I saw it, standing at the far end of the street, barely visible through the falling ash. The shape, tall and hunched, its limbs too long, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. It did not move. It only stood there, watching, and I could see the glow of its eyes, pale and cold, fixed on me with an intensity that felt almost curious. And then, slowly, deliberately, it raised one arm. No, not an arm, something else, something bladed and wrong, and it pointed at me. And it spoke, in a voice that was a broken mimicry of a human scream. Not alone. The shape turned and disappeared into the ruins, and I was left kneeling in the ash, my knife trembling in my hand, my mind shattering beneath the weight of a truth I could no longer deny. The thing was not hunting me to kill me. It was hunting me because it wanted me to know I was being hunted. It was toying with me, savoring me, and it would not stop until I broke. I am breaking. The thing that hunts me does not sleep. I know this because I have tried to outlast it, tried to move only when exhaustion forces it to rest, and it is always there, always watching, always one step behind or one step ahead. I have been on Valdrath Secundus for 5 weeks now. 5 weeks alone. 5 weeks learning that death is not the worst thing that can happen to a man. The worst thing is knowing that death is coming, slowly, inevitably, and that there is nothing you can do but wait. I have developed routines, rituals, small acts of control in a world where I control nothing. I wake or rise, since I no longer truly sleep, and I check the barricades I have built around whatever shelter I have claimed for the night. I search for food, for water, for anything that can keep me alive for one more day. I mark the walls with tally marks, counting the days, though I do not know why, since there is no one to report to, no one to remember. I talk to myself, because the silence is worse than the sound of my own voice, because if I do not speak, I will forget how, and forgetting how to speak feels like the final step toward becoming something less than human. And at night, I listen. I listen for the footsteps, for the breathing, for the whispers that come from the darkness, and I grip my knife and I wait. The thing is intelligent. That is what terrifies me most. It does not simply hunt. It thinks. It plans. It learns. It has taken to disturbing my shelters while I am away, rearranging my supplies, moving objects from one place to another, leaving signs that it has been there. I return to a bunker I had barricaded and find the door open. The debris I had stacked against it neatly moved aside, as if inviting me in. I find ration packs opened, their contents spilled across the floor. I find my helmet vox moved from where I left it, placed in the center of the room, its speaker crackling with static. Once, I return to find a corpse sitting upright in the corner, propped against the wall, its empty eye sockets turned toward the doorway, its hands arranged in its lap, as if waiting for me. The corpse had not been there when I left. It had been dragged from somewhere else, positioned deliberately, a gift or a message or a joke. I do not know which. I only know that I did not sleep that night or the night after, and when I finally abandoned that shelter, I could still feel the corpse's gaze on my back. The thing speaks now, not always, not often, but enough that I have begun to recognize the pattern. It mimics voices, voices of the dead, voices from my past, voices I have not heard in years. It whispered to me once in the voice of my squad leader, Sergeant Harvan, a man who died in the first week of the war, his body torn apart by a cultist's improvised explosive. The thing used his voice to call my name from the darkness, and for one terrible moment I believed he was alive, that I was not alone, and I called back. The thing laughed a broken, gargling sound, and I realized what I had done, realized that it was learning, that it was testing me, that it was teaching itself how to break me. Another time, it spoke in the voice of the commissar, the man who had stood before our regiment and promised that we would hold the line together, that we would die together if we had to, that no one would be left behind. The thing used his voice to say, from somewhere in the ruins above me, "No one is coming." And I knew it was true. I knew the commissar was dead, or off-world, or had never cared in the first place. I knew that the promise had been a lie, that all the promises had been lies, and that the thing in the darkness knew this too, and was using it against me. I saw it clearly for the first time on the 32nd day. I was scavenging in the wreckage of a Medicae station, searching for antibiotics or painkillers, or anything to treat the infections that had begun to spread across my hands and arms from cuts I could not clean properly. The station had been looted already, the cabinets smashed open, the supplies scattered across the floor. I was on my knees, sifting through broken glass and rotting bandages, when I heard the sound of breathing behind me. I froze. I did not turn. I did not move. I only listened, my heart hammering, my hand inching toward my knife. The breathing grew louder, closer, and I could smell it now, a stench of rot and copper and something acrid, like burned hair. And then I felt it. A presence, leaning over me, so close I could feel the heat of its breath on the back of my neck. I turned. I do not know why. Instinct, perhaps, or desperation, or the need to see the thing that was going to kill me. And there it was, crouched on all fours less than a meter away, its body hunched and elongated, its limbs bent at angles that should have been impossible. Its flesh was pale and mottled, stretched taut over bones that pressed against the skin like ridges of stone. Its torso was partially armored with something that looked like bone plates, grown or fused into the flesh, covered in sigils that hurt to look at. One arm ended in a cluster of fingers that were too long, too many, each one tipped with a blackened claw. The other arm was not an arm at all, but a blade, a single length of bone or metal or something in between, curved and serrated, stained with old blood. Its face was the worst. It had been human once, or something like human. The jaw was split down the middle, opening sideways into mandibles lined with teeth that were cracked and yellow. Its eyes were wide and pale, glowing faintly in the dim light, and they were fixed on me with an expression I can only describe as hunger. We stared at each other for what felt like an eternity. And then, slowly, the thing tilted its head, and it smiled. Not a human smile, a mimicry, an approximation. The mandibles spread wider, revealing the throat beyond, and it made a sound, a low, wet clicking, and then it spoke, in a voice that was a broken parody of my own. Run. I ran. I do not remember making the decision. I only remember running, my boots slipping on broken glass, my breath ragged, my mind blank with terror. I heard it behind me, its footsteps fast and light, its claws scraping against the floor, and I knew it could catch me if it wanted to. Knew it was holding back, letting me run, savoring the chase. I burst through a doorway into a collapsed transit tunnel and kept running, deeper into the ruins, into the darkness, until the sound of its footsteps faded and I was alone again, gasping, weeping, my hands shaking so badly I could not hold my knife. I hid in a drainage culvert for 3 days after that. I did not move. I did not speak. I only sat in the dark, listening to the sound of water dripping, the distant groans of the dying world, and the occasional scratch of claws on metal somewhere above me. I thought about the thing's face, the way it had smiled, the way it had spoken in my voice, and I understood. It was not trying to kill me. Not yet. It was playing with me, learning from me, feeding on my fear. And when it finally grew bored, when I was no longer entertaining, it would kill me. But not before I broke completely. I have begun to hallucinate. I know this because I see things that cannot be real, things that dissolve when I focus on them, things that leave no footprints in the ash. I see my squad sometimes, standing at the end of a street, their uniforms clean, their faces whole, waving for me to follow. I call out to them, and they smile, and then they turn and walk into the ruins, and when I chase them I find only corpses, arranged in a circle, their hands reaching toward the center where I stand. I see the evacuation ships sometimes, descending through the ash-choked sky, their ramps lowering, and I run toward them, screaming for them to wait, and they lift away before I can reach them, and I am left kneeling in the ash, weeping, my voice hoarse from screaming. Once, I saw the Emperor. Not the God Emperor of the ecclesiarchy, not the master of mankind enthroned in gold, but a man. He stood in the center of a ruined plaza, his shoulders bent, his face lined with exhaustion, and he looked at me with eyes that were impossibly sad. He did not speak, but I heard his voice in my mind, quiet and weary, a single word that settled into my chest like a stone. Endure. I do not know if it was real. I do not know if it was a vision or a hallucination, or the last spasm of a mind that is fracturing beneath the weight of isolation and fear. I only know that when I blinked, he was gone, and I was alone again, and the word remained, echoing in my skull, a command or a plea or a curse. Endure. The thing has begun leaving gifts. That is the only word I have for them. Offerings, tokens, objects that it wants me to find, that it places deliberately in my path. The first was my helmet, the one I had lost when the tunnel collapsed during the evacuation. I found it sitting on a crate in the center of a bunker I had claimed. Its visor cracked, its vox set torn out, placed carefully as if it were something precious. I stared at it for a long time, my mind struggling to understand how it had found the helmet, how it had known it was mine, how it had carried it here. And then I realized it had been watching me since the beginning. Since the moment I woke in the rubble, it had seen me lose the helmet. It had retrieved it, and now it was returning it, not out of kindness, but to show me that it knew me, that it had always known me, that there was nothing about me it did not see. The second gift was a dog tag, not mine. It belonged to Carrick, the first man in my squad to die, his throat torn out by a possessed PDF trooper in the early days of the siege. I had buried him myself, had placed the tag in his hand, and covered him with rubble because there was no time for a proper funeral. The thing had dug him up, it had taken the tag, and now it had given it to me, leaving it on the floor of my shelter, still crusted with dirt and dried blood. I held the tag in my hand, and I wept, because I knew what it meant. The thing was not just hunting me, it was desecrating my dead. It was taking everything I had tried to preserve, every memory, every scrap of humanity, and it was turning it into a weapon against me. The third gift was the worst. I found it on the 45th day, placed carefully on the altar of a ruined chapel, surrounded by candles that had been lit by what? I do not know, since I had no matches, no promethium, no way to create fire. The gift was a corpse. A guardsman, his uniform torn, his face grey and withered, his body arranged in a sitting position, his hands folded in his lap, his empty eyes staring at the doorway. It was Josen, the man who had been dragged screaming into the darkness by something with too many limbs, whose body I had never found, whose death I had tried to forget. The thing had kept him. It had preserved him, or carried him, or dragged him across the dead world, and now it had brought him here, and arranged him like a saint, and lit candles around him as if this were a shrine. I stood in the doorway of the chapel, staring at Josen's corpse, and I felt something inside me break. Not anger, not fear, something deeper, something final. I walked forward, slowly, and I knelt before the altar, and I looked into Josen's empty eyes, and I whispered an apology. I apologized for not saving him. I apologized for surviving when he did not. I apologized for being too weak to bury him properly, to honor him, to remember him as anything more than a name on a dog tag I no longer had. And when I finished, I heard the breathing behind me, close and wet and deliberate, and I did not turn. I only closed my eyes and waited. The thing did not kill me. It leaned close, I could feel its breath on my neck, could smell the rotten copper, and it whispered, in a voice that was not Josen's but close enough to make me flinch, "I want you last." And then it was gone, its footsteps fading into the ruins, and I was left kneeling before the altar, before the corpse of a man I had failed, and I understood. The thing was not hunting me to kill me. It was hunting me to break me. It wanted me to see everything I had lost, everything I had failed to protect, everything I would never be able to save. It wanted me to know, with absolute certainty, that I was the last. And when I finally accepted that, when I finally gave up, it would kill me. But not before. I found a Vox set on the 53rd day. It was in the wreckage of a crashed shuttle, half buried in ash, its power cell miraculously still functional. I dragged it free, my hands shaking, my breath coming in shallow gasps, and I activated it, cycling through every channel, every frequency, searching for a voice, for a signal, for anything that could tell me I was not alone. And I found one. Not a voice, a recording, old, automated, looping endlessly. Astra Militarum asset detected. Coordinates logged. Status: alive. Recommendation: no extraction authorized. Resource expenditure unjustified. World classification: extinct. Transmission ends. I listened to the recording 3 times before I understood what it meant. They knew. The Imperium knew I was alive. They had detected my signal, logged my coordinates, confirmed my status, and they had decided I was not worth saving. One guardsman, alone on a dead world, was not worth the fuel, the time, the risk. I was expendable. I had always been expendable, and they had left me here to die, not out of necessity, but out of convenience. I dropped the Vox set and sank to my knees in the ash. I did not scream. I did not weep. I only knelt there, staring at the broken shuttle, at the ash falling around me, at the dead world that had become my grave. And I laughed. It was a broken sound, more sob than laughter, but it came anyway, bubbling up from somewhere deep inside me, and I could not stop it. I laughed because there was nothing else to do, because the alternative was madness, because the Imperium had taught me to believe in duty and faith and sacrifice, and all of it had been a lie. And then I heard it, the breathing, close, too close. I turned, my laughter dying in my throat, and I saw the thing standing behind me, its pale eyes glowing, its mandibles spread in that terrible mimicry of a smile. It had been listening. It had heard the recording. It had seen me break. And now it leaned forward, its voice a perfect mimicry of a commissar's cold, flat tone, and it whispered, "No one is coming." I stared at it, and I felt the last ember of hope inside me flicker and die. The thing was right. No one was coming. No one had ever been coming. I was alone on a dead world, and I would die here, and the Imperium would not remember, would not care, would not even record my death in their endless archives. I was nothing. I had always been nothing. The thing tilted its head, watching me, waiting for me to run, to fight, to break completely. But I did not move. I only sat in the ash, my knife in my hand, my eyes fixed on the thing that had hunted me for 53 days, and I whispered the only truth I had left. Then come and finish it. The thing stared at me for a long moment, and then, slowly, deliberately, it turned and walked away, disappearing into the ruins, its footsteps fading into the silence. And I was left alone in the ash, beneath the dead sky, and I understood. It was not finished with me yet. It wanted me to endure a little longer, to suffer a little more. And so I did, because I had no choice. The planet is trying to kill me now. That is what I tell myself when the acid rain begins to fall, when the ground cracks open into sinkholes that swallow entire buildings, when the ash storms rise and blot out what little light filters through the dead sky. Valdrath Secundus is not just dead. It is dying, collapsing in on itself. And I am caught in the slow disintegration of a world the Imperium has condemned. The air grows colder each day. The ash falls heavier. The structures that remain standing groan and shudder as if the planet's crust itself is giving up. I move through the ruins like a ghost, searching for shelter that will not collapse, for food that has not rotted, for water that is not poisoned. I am starving. I can see my ribs through my skin, can feel the bones of my hips pressing against the torn fabric of my uniform. My hands shake constantly. My vision blurs. My thoughts come slowly, sluggishly, as if my mind is drowning in exhaustion. The thing is bolder now. It no longer hides in the shadows, no longer waits for nightfall to approach. It follows me openly, keeping a distance of 20 or 30 meters, its pale eyes fixed on me, its movements deliberate and unhurried. Sometimes it walks on two legs, its posture hunched, its blade arm dragging against the ground with a metallic scrape. Sometimes it drops to all fours and lopes alongside me, matching my pace, its head tilted as if studying me. It does not attack, it only watches. And when I stop, it stops. And when I move, it moves, a shadow, a mirror, a predator that has learned patience. I tried to lose it once. I ran through a maze of collapsed transit tunnels, ducking through narrow gaps, climbing over piles of rubble, doubling back on my path in an attempt to confuse it. I ran until my lungs burned, until my legs gave out, until I collapsed in a dark corner of the tunnels and waited, listening for the sound of claws on stone. And after a long silence, I heard it, the wet, labored breathing, close and deliberate. I looked up, my vision swimming, and saw it crouched on the ceiling above me, its body pressed flat against the rockcrete, its eyes glowing in the darkness. It did not move. It only watched, and I understood. I could not lose it. I could not escape it. It knew this world better than I did. It had claimed this world, and I was the last living thing it had to toy with. The acid rain came on the 61st day. I was scavenging in the wreckage of a supply depot when the sky darkened, the clouds churning and thickening until they hung so low I felt I could reach up and touch them. The rain began as a drizzle, cold and stinging, and within minutes it became a downpour, hissing as it struck the ash, eating into the metal and stone and flesh of the corpses scattered across the ground. I ran for cover, my skin burning where the rain touched it, and I found a half-collapsed bunker, its roof intact enough to keep out the worst of the downpour. I huddled inside, my uniform soaked, my skin blistered and raw, and I listened to the rain hammer against the walls. And then I heard the scratching. Not on the door, not on the walls, on the roof, directly above me. The thing was up there, moving slowly, deliberately, dragging its claws across the metal in long, scraping strokes. I could hear it breathing, could hear the wet rasp of its lungs, and I realized it was waiting for the roof to corrode, waiting for the acid to eat through the metal, waiting for me to be forced out into the rain. I pressed myself against the far wall and counted the seconds, the minutes, the hours, and the rain did not stop. The scratching did not stop, and when the roof finally began to leak, when the acid dripped through the cracks and burned into my skin, I had no choice but to run. I burst out of the bunker into the downpour. my vision blurred by rain and pain, and I saw the thing crouched on the roof, watching me. It did not follow. It only tilted its head, its mandibles spread in that terrible smile, and I ran, my feet slipping in the ash-slick mud, my body screaming with pain as the rain ate into my flesh. I found shelter in a chimera wreck, crawling through a gap in the hull, and I huddled inside, shivering, my skin covered in blisters, my mind fracturing beneath the weight of pain and exhaustion. The thing did not follow. It did not need to. It knew I would survive. It knew I would endure, and it wanted me to. The warp-tainted fog came on the 68th day. It rolled through the ruins like a living thing, thick and grey and shot through with veins of sickly green light. It smelled of copper and rot and something sweet, like decaying flowers. I tried to avoid it, tried to move perpendicular to its advance, but it spread too quickly, swallowing the streets and buildings, reducing visibility to a few meters. I wrapped a scrap of cloth around my face and moved cautiously, my knife in one hand, my other hand trailing along the walls to keep my bearings. And then I heard the whispers. They came from everywhere and nowhere, voices speaking in low Gothic and High Gothic and languages I did not recognize. They spoke my name. They spoke the names of my dead squadmates. They spoke promises and threats and lies that twisted in my mind like worms. I tried to ignore them, tried to focus on the ground beneath my feet, but the whispers grew louder, more insistent, and I began to see shapes in the fog. Figures, human-shaped but wrong, their proportions distorted, their movements too fluid. They reached toward me, their hands elongated and skeletal, and when I swung my knife at them they dissolved into mist, only to reappear behind me, whispering, always whispering. And then I saw the Emperor again. He stood in the center of the fog, barely visible, his form flickering like a dying pict screen. He was not glorious, he was not divine. He was only a man, shoulders bent, face lined with exhaustion, and he looked at me with an expression I can only describe as pity. He spoke, and his voice was quiet, sorrowful, cutting through the whispers like a blade. Endure. I reached toward him, my hand trembling, but he faded before I could touch him, dissolving into the fog, and I was left alone again, the whispers rising around me like a tide. I do not know if it was real. I do not know if he was there, or if my mind conjured him from desperation and madness. I only know that the word remained, echoing in my skull, a command I could not refuse. Endure. The thing has begun to play with the dead. That is the only way I can describe it. I find corpses arranged in patterns, now circles, lines, spirals, their limbs positioned with deliberate care, their empty eyes all facing the same direction. Sometimes they face me, sometimes they face the sky. Once, I found them arranged in a circle around a pile of ash, their hands reaching toward the center, and in the ash were scratched the words, "Last one." The corpses whisper sometimes, not truly. It is the wind, I tell myself, passing through their throats, through the gaps in their split flesh, creating sounds that mimic speech. But it sounds like whispering. It sounds like my name. And when I walk past them, when I try to ignore them, I feel their eyes on me, feel the weight of their gaze, and I know the thing is watching through them, using them as extensions of itself, as reminders that I am surrounded by death, that I will join them soon. I found my helmet again on the 73rd day. Not the one the thing had returned before. A different one. My original helmet, the one I had been wearing when the tunnel collapsed. I had thought it lost, buried beneath tons of rubble, but here it was, placed carefully on a broken statue of the Emperor in the center of a ruined plaza. The visor was cracked. The Vox set was still attached, and inside the helmet, nestled where my head would have been, was a human hand. Severed, withered. The fingers curled as if grasping something. I did not recognize it. I did not want to. I only stared at it, my mind blank, and then I heard the thing's voice, echoing from somewhere in the ruins, speaking in a voice that was a broken parody of my own. Gift. I turned and saw it standing on the roof of a collapsed hab block, its blade arm raised, pointing at the helmet. It did not move. It only watched, waiting for my reaction. And I felt something inside me snap. Not fear, not anger, something deeper, something primal. I picked up a piece of rubble and hurled it at the thing, screaming, my voice raw and broken, and the rubble fell short, crashing into the street. And the thing tilted its head and made a sound that might have been laughter, and then it turned and disappeared into the ruins, and I was left alone in the plaza, weeping, my hands covered in ash, my mind fracturing beneath the weight of a truth I could no longer deny. I was not going to survive this. I had known it from the beginning, but I had clung to hope, to the belief that rescue would come, that someone would remember me, that the Imperium would not abandon one of its own. But the Imperium had abandoned me. The Emperor was silent, and the thing that hunted me would not stop until I broke completely, until I became something less than human, until I forgot my name, my purpose, my last scrap of humanity. And then, when there was nothing left, it would kill me, but not before. I tried to fight it on the 80th day. I do not know why. Desperation, perhaps, or the need to do something, to take some action, to prove that I was still alive, still capable, still human. I had found a cache of frag grenades in a Militarum depot, their seals still intact, their timers still functional. I set a trap in a narrow corridor, rigging the grenades to a tripwire, and I waited, my knife in one hand, my breath shallow. I did not have to wait long. The thing came, moving slowly, deliberately, its claws scraping against the walls, its eyes glowing in the darkness. It saw the tripwire. I know it did. It paused, tilted its head, and then it stepped over the wire with deliberate care, as if mocking me. It stopped in front of me, close enough that I could see the details of its face, the split mandibles, the cracked teeth, the pale eyes that reflected my own terrified expression. And it spoke, in a voice that was mine but not mine. Try. I lunged at it, my knife aimed at its throat, but it was faster. Its blade arm came up and caught my wrist, twisting, and I felt the bones crack, felt the knife fall from my numb fingers. It lifted me off the ground, holding me suspended, its mandibles spreading into that terrible smile, and I screamed, not from pain but from rage, from despair, from the knowledge that I had failed, that I was helpless, that I was nothing. And then it dropped me, and I collapsed to the ground, gasping, my wrist shattered, and it leaned down, its face inches from mine, and it whispered, "Not yet." It turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness, and I lay on the cold stone floor, weeping, my broken wrist cradled against my chest, and I understood. It was not going to kill me. Not yet. It wanted me to suffer a little more, to endure a little longer. And so I did, because I had no choice. The Vox Tower rises from the ruins like a broken finger, its structure twisted and leaning, its antenna collapsed across the roof of a nearby hab block. I have been walking toward it for 3 days, moving slowly, my broken wrist bound with scraps of cloth, my body so weak I can barely stand. The tower is the last functional structure in this sector, the only place where I might be able to send a signal, to leave some record of what happened here, some confession that might survive even if I do not. I do not know if anyone will hear it. I do not know if anyone will care. But I have to try. I have to leave something behind, some proof that I existed, that I witnessed the death of a world, that I was not simply erased. The ascent is agony. The tower's interior is a maze of collapsed floors and twisted metal, the stairs half destroyed, the walls scarred by last fire and explosions. I climb slowly, using my good hand to pull myself up, my legs trembling with exhaustion, my vision swimming. I pass through rooms filled with smashed Vox equipment, through corridors choked with ash, through a Medicae station where the bodies of the operators still sit at their consoles, their hands frozen on the controls, their faces withered and grey. I do not stop. I cannot stop. If I stop, I will collapse. And if I collapse, I will not get up again. The hallucinations grow worse as I climb. I see my squadmates standing in doorways, their uniforms clean, their faces whole, calling for me to follow. I see the commissar standing at the top of the stairs, his bolt pistol raised, his voice cold and flat. Duty unto death. Guardsman. I see the Emperor standing in the center of a ruined room, his form flickering like a dying flame, his eyes fixed on me with an expression I cannot read. I blink, and they are gone, and I am alone again, climbing, always climbing. I reach the top of the tower as the sky darkens, the ash clouds churning and thickening, the air growing colder. The roof is open to the elements, the antenna collapsed, the Vox equipment smashed. But there is one console still intact, its power cell flickering weakly, its controls still functional. I collapse in front of it, my hands shaking, and I activate the Vox, cycling through every channel, every frequency, searching for anything that might carry my voice beyond this dead world. And I find one, an emergency broadcast channel, automated, looping endlessly. I do not know if anyone is listening. I do not care. I press the transmit button and I speak, my voice broken and raw, pouring out everything I have seen, everything I have felt, everything I have lost. I speak of the evacuation, of the tunnel collapsing, of waking to find myself alone on a dead world. I speak of the Imperium's decision to abandon me, to declare me not worth saving. I speak of the thing that hunts me, the creature that was once human, that has learned to speak, to mimic, to torment. I speak of the corpses arranged in patterns, of the gifts left for me to find, of the visions of the Emperor that may or may not be real. I speak of the truth I have learned, that the Imperium does not care about its soldiers, that we are numbers in a ledger, expendable, forgettable, erased the moment we cease to be useful. I speak until my voice gives out, until the Vox set's power cell begins to die, until I have nothing left to say. And then I hear it, the scraping of claws on metal, the wet rasp of breathing, the sound of something climbing the exterior of the tower, moving slowly, deliberately, savoring the final moments of the hunt. I turn, my knife in my good hand, and I see it, the thing pulling itself over the edge of the roof, its pale eyes glowing, its mandibles spread in that terrible smile. It does not rush. It does not attack. It only stands there, watching, waiting for me to make the first move. I do not run. There is nowhere left to run. I only stand, my knife raised, my body trembling, and I meet its gaze, and I speak, my voice barely a whisper. Come on then, finish it. The thing tilts its head, as if considering, and then it moves, faster than I can react, its blade arms sweeping toward me. I try to dodge, but I am too slow, too weak, and the blade catches me across the ribs, tearing through my flak armor, cutting deep into flesh. I scream, more from shock than pain, and I swing my knife wildly, and by some miracle it connects, sinking into the thing's shoulder. It recoils, hissing, and I stagger backward, my hand pressed against my side, blood pouring between my fingers. We circle each other, both wounded, both bleeding, and I see something in its eyes I have not seen before. Frustration. It had expected me to break. It had expected me to beg, to plead, to give up. But I am still standing, I am still fighting, and it does not understand why. I lunge at it again, my knife aimed at its throat, and it catches my wrist with its good arm, twisting, and I feel the bones in my broken wrist grind together, and I scream, but I do not let go. I drive my shoulder into its chest, and we crash to the ground together, rolling across the roof, grappling, clawing, two broken things fighting in the ruins of a dead world. I feel its claws tearing into my back, feel its mandibles snapping inches from my face, and I drive my knife into its side, again and again, until the blade breaks, until my hand is slick with its blood, until I have nothing left. And then the tower shakes. A low, grinding roar echoes from below, and I realize the structure is collapsing, the supports finally giving way after weeks of neglect and decay. The thing realizes it too. It releases me and tries to scramble toward the edge of the roof, but the floor tilts beneath us, and we both slide toward the collapsed antenna, toward the edge, toward the drop. I grab a piece of twisted rebar, my good hand slipping on the blood and ash, and I hold on as the roof tilts further. The thing is not so lucky. It slides past me, its claws scraping against the metal, its eyes wide with something that might be fear, and it falls, tumbling over the edge, disappearing into the ruins below. I do not hear it land. I only hear the roar of the collapsing tower, the groan of metal tearing apart, and I know I have seconds before the entire structure comes down. I pull myself toward the edge, my body screaming with pain, and I see a cable dangling from the collapsed antenna, swaying in the wind. I grab it with my good hand and I slide down, too fast, the cable burning my palm, and I hit the ground hard, my legs buckling, my vision exploding into stars. I lie in the rubble, gasping, my body broken, my mind blank, and I listen to the tower collapse behind me, the metal shrieking as it folds in on itself, the dust and ash rising in a cloud that blots out the sky. And when the noise finally stops, when the dust begins to settle, I drag myself to my feet, and I look for the thing. I find it 50 meters away, pinned beneath a slab of rockcrete, its body crushed, its blade arm bent at an unnatural angle. Its eyes are still open, still glowing faintly, and they are fixed on me. It tries to move, tries to reach for me, but it cannot. It is dying. I walk toward it, slowly, my body trembling, my broken ribs grinding with every step. I stand over it, and I look down at the creature that has hunted me for 87 days, that has tormented me, that has broken me in ways I will never fully understand. And I feel nothing. Not anger, not relief, only exhaustion, only the quiet certainty that it is over. The thing's mandibles move, forming words, and I hear its voice one last time, broken and wet, a whisper that sounds almost human. Not alone. And then its eyes dim, and it is still, and I am alone again, standing in the ruins of a dead world, surrounded by the bodies of the dead, and I realize that it was right. I was not alone. I had the thing. And now that it is gone, now that I am truly, utterly alone, I feel the weight of that absence like a knife in my chest. I am hiding in a ruined chapel on the outskirts of the hive, and I know I am dying. The wound in my side has become infected, the flesh around it black and swollen, the smell of rot clinging to me like a shroud. My broken wrist throbs with a constant, dull ache. My vision comes and goes, blurring at the edges, darkening when I move too quickly. I have not eaten in days. I have not slept. I only sit here in the darkness, my back against the cold stone wall, my knife in my good hand, and I wait for the end. The chapel is small, its walls cracked and blackened by fire, its roof half collapsed, the aquila carved into the altar defaced by time or vandals, or the slow decay of a world that has been abandoned by the Imperium. The floor is littered with spent shell casings and broken glass, and the air smells of ash and old blood and the faint, sweet stench of my own rotting flesh. I have dragged myself here because there is nowhere else to go, because the tower collapsed and the Vox set was destroyed and the signal I sent will never be heard, will never reach anyone who cares. I am the last man on a dead world, and I will die here, forgotten, unmourned, erased from the records of the Imperium as if I never existed. I have written this confession in the margins of a battered field manual, using a stylus I found in the wreckage of a supply depot. My handwriting is barely legible, my hands shaking so badly I can hardly hold the stylus. But I have to finish this. I have to set down the truth, even if no one will ever read it, because someone must remember. Someone must know what happened on Valdrath Secundus, what the Imperium did, what I witnessed, what I endured. The Imperium declared my world dead. They evacuated their assets, the soldiers, the priests, the officers, and they left me behind. They knew I was alive. They detected my signal. They logged my coordinates, and they decided I was not worth saving. One guardsman, alone on a dead world, was not worth the fuel, the time, the risk. I was expendable. I had always been expendable, and when I finally understood that, when I finally accepted that the promises of duty and honor and the Emperor's protection were lies, I felt something inside me break. Not my body. My body was already broken. My soul. The thing that hunted me is dead. I killed it, or the collapsing tower killed it, or the planet itself killed it. It does not matter. It is gone, and I am alone, truly alone. For 87 days I was hunted, tormented, broken, and for 87 days I hated the thing, feared it, wished for it to die. But now that it is dead, now that I am alone, I realize that it was the only thing that made me feel human. It hunted me, yes. It tormented me, yes. But it saw me. It knew me. It remembered my name. And now that it is gone, I am nothing. I am a ghost on a dead world, waiting for the final darkness to claim me. I have seen the Emperor twice. I do not know if the visions were real or if they were hallucinations, my mind fracturing beneath the weight of isolation and starvation and fear, but they felt real. He felt real, not the God Emperor of the Ecclesiarchy, not the master of mankind enthroned in gold, but a man, tired, sorrowful, carrying a burden too vast to comprehend. He looked at me with eyes that understood suffering, that had seen the death of worlds, the betrayal of friends, the slow corruption of everything he had tried to build. And he spoke one word, over and over, a command or a plea or a curse. Endure. I have endured. I have endured for 87 days. I have endured the hunger, the thirst, the cold, the acid rain, the warp-tainted fog, the thing that hunted me. I have endured the knowledge that the Imperium abandoned me, that the Emperor is silent, that there is no salvation, no rescue, no reward for my suffering. I have endured because I did not know how to do anything else, but I cannot endure any longer. My body is failing, my mind is failing, and I am ready to let go. I have left copies of this confession in the ruins, hidden in the wrecks of vehicles, in the cracks of broken walls, in places the Imperium might not think to look if they ever return to this world. I do not know if anyone will find them. I do not know if anyone will care. But I had to try. I had to leave something behind, some proof that I existed, that I witnessed the death of a world, that I was not simply erased. I think about my squad sometimes. Carrick, Selara, Josen, Varro, Ilara, the others whose names I can barely remember now. They are all dead. They died fighting, or they died fleeing, or they died on the evacuation transports, their bodies burned to ash in the void. They are gone. And I am the last witness, the last memory. And when I die, they will die with me, forgotten, erased, as if they never lived. I hear sounds outside the chapel, distant, faint, the groan of stressed metal, the whisper of wind through the ruins, the patter of ash against the walls. I do not know if the Ecclesiarchy is hunting me, if they have returned to this dead world to eliminate the last witness, to ensure that no one ever learns what happened here. I do not care. Let them come. Let them execute me. Let them burn this confession and erase my name from their records. It does not matter. I am already dead. I have been dead since the moment the Imperium abandoned me. I close my eyes, and I see the Emperor one last time. He stands in the center of the chapel, his form flickering like a dying flame, his shoulders bent, his face lined with exhaustion. He does not speak. He does not need to. I understand. He is as alone as I am. He is as abandoned as I am. He endures because he does not know how to do anything else. And so do I. I set down the stylus and I lean back against the wall, my broken body finally at rest, my mind quiet for the first time in 87 days. I close my eyes and I wait for the darkness to claim me. And as the cold seeps into my bones, as my breath grows shallow, as the world fades into silence, I whisper the truth that no one will ever hear. I was not alone. I had the thing. I had the Emperor, watching from the shadows. I had the dead, whispering my name. And now I have this, the knowledge that I endured, that I survived, that I carried the truth to the end, even when no one cared, even when no one listened. And that is enough. I open my eyes one last time, and I see him standing over me, his hand outstretched, not in benediction but in fellowship, and I reach up, my broken hand trembling, and I take his hand, and the darkness comes, and I am not afraid. I walked alone on a dead world, and the silence finally learned my name.